What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you a recap of Week 7 of the 2024 college football season. The first half of the season is now officially over. We now head into the second half. We got 7 more weeks of college football left, and this season has already flown by. So it's been a really good first half of the college football season. Looking at Week 7, a ton of great games over the weekend. We saw some competitive games and also some great finishes to some games going into overtime. We also had some rivalry games. Texas and Oklahoma, that was a big one there, even though that game was not even close. Tennessee and Florida. And then we had the big one. Game day, of course, was there. Oregon and Ohio State, their first Big Ten Conference showdown, and it did not disappoint. So we're going to give you my 5 biggest recaps here from Week 7 of the 2024 college football season. And we'll go from the bottom and all the way to the top. We'll start here with my number 5 biggest recap. The number 5 biggest recap, Boise State is the clear favorite in the Mountain West Conference. I think that's pretty clear. Boise State has been impressive here in the last, few weeks ever since they lost to Oregon in week number 2. A game they only lost by 3 points, and that Oregon game is looking like a really good loss on their resume. Boise State doesn't really have like the best resume to be like a top 10 team, but they are definitely right there in the top 25, and they're also right there among one of the favorites in the Mountain West to make that college football playoff spot. You look at Boise State, they got one of the best running backs in the country. He played another great game here in this game against Hawaii. Had over 200 yards of rushing, and then, of course, had some catches, and then had a receiving touchdown, I believe. So he had like 231 yards of total offense for him. So, yeah, he's coming one of the best running backs in the country. Can't really remember his name, but, he's probably one of the front runners to win the Heisman, in my opinion. So, yeah, you look at this Boise State team. The path they have the rest of the way. They got UNLV to, probably to play in the Mountain West Conference Championship. UNLV, they have lost the game already, but that was to a Power 4 team. They lost to Syracuse, from week number 6. So, yeah, Boise State and UNLV are likely the favorites to get to the Mountain West Championship, and it possibly could be a matchup here between these two teams. As of right now, I do favor Boise State. Boise State was my preseason pick to make it to the college football playoff as that number 12 seed out of the group of 5 level. So I think that could be clear. We'll find out, of course, here in the next few weeks, going into the second half of the year. Teams will get better as the season goes along, but I do want to see Boise State and UNLV go head-to-head, and I want to see who can make that college football playoff spot. But it could be also a rematch in the Mountain West Conference Championship. Both teams have not lost a conference game just yet, so both of these teams are pretty even. They're both very talented as well. But yeah, Boise State, they have definitely looked like the best team in the Mountain West because of their running game and also because of their defense. They have been dominant in the last few weeks of their games. So yeah, Boise State, I think right now is the clear favorite in the Mountain West. This is looking like a really dangerous team at the group of 5 level, and they are probably that top team to probably make it into the college football playoff. Based on their resume. They got the loss to Oregon. I think that would probably be enough to get them in. And also, if they beat UNLV in the Mountain West Championship, they'll definitely have the best resume out of all the group of 5 teams. So watch out here for Boise State. They are the clear favorite in the Mountain West. It's not a big takeaway, and it's also not a big recap, but I wanted to include them and give them some credit, for what they've done here in the last few weeks. So that's my number 5 biggest recap. Boise State is the clear favorite in the Mountain West. Moving on to number 4, this is not a big takeaway, but also not a big recap. What has happened to Alabama? Let's be honest, Alabama has not looked good, and they have not looked like a top 10 team in the last couple of weeks. You go back to the Georgia game back on September 28, we thought Alabama was going to be unstoppable. They were definitely going to be the favorite to win the SEC, and it could have been Alabama versus Texas in the SEC championship, but it's not really looking like an Alabama team that we expected it to be. Now, this goes back to last year. Remember, Jalen Milroe got off to a pretty slow start in the first half. That whole Alabama team got off to a pretty slow start in the first half of the year. Then second half of the year, Jalen Milroe started using his legs, and then also the Alabama offense just continued to get better and better as the season went along and everything. But this Alabama team, they have just not looked good in the last couple weeks. Let's be honest. They lose, to Vanderbilt in week number 6, I believe. So yeah, week number 6 they lost to Vanderbilt, and they have not looked good in the last couple weeks. Against this game against South Carolina, You look at South Carolina, they're a pretty average team. They came into this one as a pretty average 3-2 team. We were kind of expecting Alabama to really roll in this game by, to win this one like 38-17. 38-17 was my final score prediction, but that did not even happen. It was only a 2-point win for Alabama, 27-25. South Carolina scored a touchdown. They had a chance to, get down the field, tie the game up at 27-all. They failed the 2-point conversion, but they recovered the onside kick, and they had a chance to kick the game-winning field goal. The problem is they didn't have any timeouts left, so that was a really big mistake there by South Carolina at the end of the game. But either way, Alabama does survive. But you look at Alabama's path the rest of the way. Could they still make the college football playoff? I really don't know, just depending on how they've been playing here in the last couple of weeks. Maybe this was a really big of a fluke of a game here for Alabama. Maybe they haven't got over the Vanderbilt loss just yet. Maybe they are still going to not get over it until they get into the game against Tennessee this weekend. That Tennessee game is going to be a tough one, though. That game, of course, will be on the road. Not sure what the time is for that game. I assume it's going to be like a 3:30 ABC time game, or maybe it could be a night game. You never know. But Alabama and Tennessee will go head-to-head this weekend. Alabama, though, we're talking about them here in this one. Again, what has happened to Alabama ever since they beat Georgia back on September 28th? This is a team that we thought was going to be the favorite to win the SEC and also probably potentially be that number 1 seed in the college football playoff based on their resume just because they beat, Georgia and everything. So, again, Alabama has to get things corrected in order to kind of, make a run here for the rest of the way. And, again, they still have a tough schedule the rest of the way. You got Tennessee coming up on Saturday. And then you got LSU still on the schedule to play, and then you got Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma might be an easy game for Alabama, but, it's against a good defense of Oklahoma. But you look at, LSU in Death Valley, that will be a very tough one. They lost there a couple years ago. So, yeah, Alabama's got some issues that they need to fix here. It has just not looked really good here for the Tide in the last couple weeks, so that is my number 4 biggest recap. Like I said, not a big recap and also not a big takeaway, but Alabama, what has happened to Alabama? We'll find out here in the next few weeks and also the second half of the season if they can get better. So that is my number 4 biggest recap. My number 3 biggest recap, could we see BYU versus Iowa State in the Big 12 championship? I mean, as of right now, that is the clear case scenario here for this conference. BYU and Iowa State are both undefeated. They both get really good wins yesterday. Iowa State kind of started off slow against West Virginia, but they ended up pulling away in the second half, and by that fourth quarter, their defense made the plays that they had to. I think we know that Iowa State's got a pretty good defense, and we know that BYU has a really good offense. That has shown here for the last couple weeks. BYU's been a really surprise team, in my opinion. They're 6-0, and then Iowa State is also 6-0. So both of these teams, as of right now, could make the Big 12 championship. Could we see BYU versus Iowa State here in the Big 12 championship? I mean, that's very likely that we could see that. You got, other games here in the Big 12 that went on from yesterday. How about Colorado and Kansas State? That was a great finish to that game from yesterday. Kansas State surviving against Colorado. I thought we would see an upset there, to be honest, because I feel like Colorado had the best chance to probably pull off the upset, and if they would have won that game, Colorado probably would have been in my top 25 for tomorrow. I'll give you my updated top 25 for tomorrow, but I feel like Colorado just had so many chances to win that game. And then again, BYU and Iowa State are, potentially the 2 teams that can make it into the, Big 12 championship, and also they could probably be in the playoff as well. BYU does have a pretty good resume. They had the win over Kansas State, which is still like a great win for them. Iowa State has the win over Iowa, but, that's not really a big win, but it's also like a great win against, like a really good defensive Iowa. So, yeah, both of these teams could be in the Big 12 championship. Now, another Big 12 games, how about Arizona State pulling off the upset against Utah? I think a lot of people probably saw that coming, to be honest. I did see it coming. I did predict an upset that would happen. And then you look at, Cam Rising. Cam Rising was back in that game, but with Cam Rising in there, this Utah team is not really good. So Utah and Oklahoma State, they probably won't make it to the Big 12 championship just based off of what's happened here in the last couple weeks. Oklahoma State had a bye week, but they haven't won a conference game yet. And then you look at Texas Tech and Arizona State. They are probably the 3rd and 4th best teams in the Big 12. So, yeah, the Big 12 is definitely a lot different this year. We thought it was going to be run by Oklahoma State and Utah. But it now seems like it's BYU, Iowa State, and then, of course, Kansas State. You can't really count them out out just yet. And then also you got the Arizona State Sun Devils, and then you got Texas Tech. All of these teams could make it to the Big 12 championship, and also they could make it to the college football playoff. So yeah, the Big 12 is shaping up to be one of the best conferences, and like I said, it was in the preseason. It was going to be a lot of these teams beating up on each other, and that's exactly what we've had in the first half of the year. We'll see what happens here in the second half of the season. Will BYU and Iowa State stay undefeated, or will they slip up somewhere? I think they probably will slip up somewhere, but we'll find out where that game's going to be at. So this is my number 3 biggest recap. Based off of what we've seen in the first half of the year, could we see BYU versus Iowa State in the Big 12 championship? That is what it's looking like as of right now here in the Big 12 conference. All right, let's get now into the most important recaps, number 1 and number 2 biggest recaps. My number 2 biggest recap, Oregon now becomes the front runner in the Big 10. I think that's pretty clear. Boy, what a game this was from yesterday. Oregon and Ohio State, what a finish to this one. Oregon gets the win, 32-31, I believe. That was the final score of the game from last night. Ohio State had a chance to get the game-winning field goal. They had a chance to really, survive this game and also escape with a win here. But Will Howard, scrambles and runs out the clock. That was a big mistake there at the end of this ball game. But you look at both of these teams, they're both pretty talented. We knew this was going to be the biggest game coming up in the preseason in the Big Ten, and also the game of the weekend, and also maybe potentially the game of the year. But Alabama and Georgia was really close to being the game of the year. This one is not really that far behind. So again, both of these teams, these were two very talented rosters, and, both teams just lived up to their expectations. We knew it was going to be an undefeated matchup and also potentially a top 5 matchup. Even though Oregon did not look good in the first 2 weeks, they have been so much better ever since those first 2 games, and they're getting better and better each and every single time when they step out on the field. Now, Ohio State, wouldn't count them out just yet. They're not really that far behind in the Big Ten championship race. We saw Penn State, they're undefeated still. They're one out of those 2 teams that are undefeated still. Oregon and Penn State are the 2 undefeated teams left standing in the Big Ten Conference, just like the Big 12 between BYU and Iowa State. Could we see Penn State versus Oregon in a Big Ten championship game? Those 2 teams do not play each other in the regular season, which really is kind of a disappointment, to be honest. I was kind of wanting to see those 2 teams go head-to-head. But either way, Penn State did survive in overtime yesterday against USC 33-30. So yeah, both of these teams do remain undefeated. So yeah, some great finishes to games yesterday in the Big Ten Conference. I think the Big Ten is kind of like how we expected it to be, though, because both of these teams, Oregon and Ohio State, I did predict Oregon that would win the matchup in the regular season, but in the prediction video, I did say that Ohio State was going to win, so I did change my pick, but Oregon did prove me wrong, and they proved everybody wrong in this game. So yeah, Oregon gets the win over Ohio State. I'm pretty sure Oregon now is becoming the clear front runner in the Big Ten Conference. I mean, they have an easy path the rest of the way. There's no question about it. They don't really have a tough schedule whatsoever. They got a very talented team. Dylan Gabriel, you really trust him a lot to make the throws down the field. And again, the only toughest game they have left on their schedule, I would say, is probably Michigan. They got to go on the road to play that game, so that will be a very tough one there. But you look at Ohio State, I mean, they still got to play, Penn State on the road. That'll be a tricky one. That game probably does decide who gets to the Big Ten championship the rest of the way and gets a rematch with Oregon. Or it could be a matchup between Penn State and Oregon. We'll find out here in the second half of the season and see how that game goes down here for the next few weeks. So yeah, Oregon now becomes the clear front runner in the Big Ten after their win over Ohio State. And that is my number 2 biggest recap. But now we go to my number 1 biggest recap, the most important recap here of Week 7 of the 2024 college football season. And that is Texas is now the team to beat in the SEC. I think that's pretty clear now. Texas is the only undefeated team in this conference. Texas, you look at their game against Oklahoma, they started off slow. They turned the ball over on their first possession. Quinn Ewers was back at quarterback, throws an interception in the first play of the game. And then also you look at, Oklahoma getting the field goal. It looked like it was going to be a defensive battle, but then after that, field goal by Oklahoma and that big-time turnover by the Sooners, it was all Texas from there. Texas definitely looked like the better team here, and Texas now is the team to beat in the SEC. They're the only undefeated team. Boy, we saw a lot of great games in the SEC, to be honest. How about Florida and Tennessee going into overtime? Tennessee gets a game-winning touchdown. Florida missed the field goal to go up like 20-17. Tennessee, though, rushes it in for a touchdown. And Tennessee survives 23-17. That sets up a big-time matchup coming up between two one-loss teams, between Alabama and Tennessee coming up this weekend. So, yeah, that ought to be a good one there. But we saw a lot of great games. How about LSU upsetting Ole Miss? That game, of course, winning into overtime. How about Vanderbilt beating Kentucky? Boy, Vanderbilt was a 13.5-point underdog. Boy, Vanderbilt's been a surprise. They are 4-2. So, yeah, the Condors, they pull off another big upset there. They beat Alabama, of course, from last weekend, and then this past weekend, they beat, of course, Kentucky on the road. So, yeah, that Vanderbilt team is looking really good. Missouri, they beat UMass 45-3, so not much to talk about Missouri, but, yeah, Texas is now the team to beat in the SEC. We saw, of course, Texas A&M have a bye week. But, you look at this Texas team, they do have a big-time test coming up against Georgia this weekend. If Texas can get past this Georgia team, and if they can, go undefeated the rest of the way, we could see Texas versus Georgia, or Texas versus Alabama, or Texas versus Tennessee, or Texas versus Texas A&M in an SEC championship game. I don't think LSU, or, maybe LSU has a chance to make it in there. Ole Miss, wouldn't really count them out just yet, but also you got, Missouri. I wouldn't really say that Missouri, though, is going to make it in, to be honest. They got a tough schedule coming up. They got to play Alabama still, but Missouri does have a pretty easy schedule. So it could be Texas. It could be any of these other one-loss teams in the SEC. So, yeah, the SEC is definitely shaping up to be like a really good finish for the rest of the way. But as of right now, we're talking about Texas. Was really impressed with their performance. Quinn Ewers, like I said, got off to a pretty slow start, but he was able to pick it up, and it was all from Texas from there. I just feel like with Quinn Ewers in there, I feel like this Texas team is the most dangerous team in the country. Not saying that Arch Manning is a bad quarterback or anything like that. But like I said, I feel like with Quinn Ewers in there, I just feel like Texas is now the best team in the SEC, and they're also the best team in the country. So, yeah, Texas is now the team to beat in the SEC. Does Texas slip up this weekend against Georgia? That's going to be the biggest game coming up this weekend in the SEC, but we'll find out here coming up this week and see what the status is of this Texas team after taking on a really good Oklahoma defense, but they scored 34 points, and they win the Red River rivalry as well against Oklahoma 34-3. So that is my number one biggest recap. Texas is now the team to beat in the SEC. And those are my 5 biggest recaps here from Week 7 of the 2024 college football season. We head into the second half of the college football season, and I think this is going to be a really exciting college football season and also a great finish to the rest of the season as well. And we'll see who can make that 12-team playoff. So let me guys know what you think about these 5 biggest recaps here from Week 7, and give me your thoughts about Week 7 down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.